When we talk about the data exfiltration methods, Kroll observed two methods that they use to exfiltrate data. One of the methods was the 95 percentile method, meaning we saw it used broadly across really most all of our engagements. They simply drop the web shell through SQL injection, and then they're either going to inject a new session as a super user for an active and create an active session, or if they could not identify a super user, they would simply create their own super user and establish a session. Once that session is established, it's set for duration infinite, and that session is simply no longer requires authentication. So for instance, it does not require MFA, it doesn't require any type of authentication in the beginning, simply because they can use that session to then exfiltrate data. And what we saw, that fourth step, is they simply attached to the session and then started pulling the files that session had, that super user had access to. And in most of the cases, the super users are going to have access to a broad amount of files. There were a small percentage of cases where we saw a slightly different tactic for exfiltrating that data. So very similar beginning, they dropped the web shell through SQL injection. They're going to inject either a new session into an active admin, or they're going to create their own admin. After that, though, what we saw is we saw them passing three variables in. They were either path organization ID or file name to pull individual files from that database. Now, when they were doing this, when they were actually having to call individual files with the information to get those files. A little bit different. We did see that, in most of the cases was done in the first method. Really, that's an indication that the second method was slower. Likely they looked at that and said, hey, these between the two methods, the second one is slower. We're not getting as much data as quicker, and then simply pivoted to only using the first method and use that broadly throughout their engagements. When they are using these methods, it's really important to note that the MOVEIt encrypts the data at rest. So the files on a MOVEIt server are actually encrypted at rest. The key is stored in the database. So on both of these methods, on the first method, when they try to pull that file, they're using an active session. So it's actually calling all of the APIs that MOVEIt normally does to grab the file, decrypt it, and then provide the decrypted file. So on their end, they're actually grabbing the decrypted file. When on the method 2, they're actually having to call the actual API calls to ensure the database has all the information to grab the file, decrypt the file, and send the file. If they just pull the file, they're going to get an encrypted file. So on that second one, they actually had to leverage each of the APIs. So seeing how they're injecting these super users, seeing how they're actually calling the proper APIs, and in case they had a very, very good knowledge of the inner workings of the MOVEIt application. Okay. Did see a question pop in. I'll address it while on this slide. It said the creation of MOVEIt account, was it consistent with all MOVEIt cases you investigated? Yes. Remember, it is an automated attack, automated script that's doing that. It was very consistent with how they were creating that account.